Oh, he's batted that. Oh, he's given him! He's given him! Umpire Bansal's given him! That's the end of the test match. India have won. India have won in dramatic style.
Hello and welcome to episode 39 of Radio Cricket. That's 39, the same number of love letters that MS Dhoni sent to N. Dhonivasan on Valentine's Day. Yes, dear listeners, after a thoroughly undeserved 2-week hiatus, Radio Cricket is back in action and we have a treat of a show for you today. I'm Nishant Joshi, future healer of the sick and current tweeter of the cricket, and I am joined, nay reunited today with my long lost love and fellow smug vegetarian. It is James Marsh.
Oh, quite, Nishant. Stop horsing around, you silly thing. Well, can I say what a delight it is to be speaking to someone who this week has been described as looking like a cross between Virat Kohli and Shoaib Akhtar in our new Radio Cricket logo. So how do you react to that sort of praise?
It's a type of thing where you on one hand you've got a guy with unfathomably bushy eyebrows, and on the other hand you've got a quite good looking guy who's pretty much only known for having genital herpes from a lady's point of view. So, I mean, it's give and take. I've been called worse. I hope I'll be called better in the future. I think I came out fair enough in the logo, but I think you came out even better, James. I mean, I think our designer did a lovely job on your face. He didn't manage to capture the luster of my hair, but he seemed to do a pretty good job with yours. I'm not sure if you gave him an IPL-style bung or something.
That's awfully kind of you to say, Nishant. I mean, I think I look slightly more embarrassing than Mark Nicholas's faux Caribbean accent, but I will take your compliments. Thank you very much. So, anyway, we have been away for 2 weeks, so what on earth have you been up to?
Well, James, I have had a psychiatry exam, and now that I am winding down my student career, every single exam is getting slightly more important, and I'll have less time for cricket and maybe even less time to record these podcasts, God forbid. But the thing is, James, I have been off for the last 2 weeks because every time I have an exam, it's kind of hard to focus with all the cricket, and I kind of need to take away all the distractions. So I kind of lock myself away in a sort of mad isolation. I'd say to get a picture of it, you need to imagine Tom Hanks in Castaway, but probably with more Maggi noodles and maybe a bit of Bangladesh Premier League as well. But, dear listeners, the upshot of all of the caffeine that I consumed over the past 2 weeks and all of these sleepless nights is that I now have just 10 exams before I become a fully qualified doctor. In case you don't know what this means, it means that I'm one step closer to fulfilling my lifelong dream of fulfilling my parents' dreams of being able to call their son a doctor.
And now to events in India, where Dhoni's men will be starting their 4-match test series against Australia on Friday. It's always one of the most iconic test series in the calendar, but it's not one that Australia have really excelled at over the years. They've only won once in India in 44 years, and that of course was the famous 2004 victory when Adam Gilchrist led them across the so-called final frontier. I suppose these days India might probably be regarded as more a sort of tricky ring road to negotiate rather than a final frontier, but I still think it's going to be quite a problematic series for the tourists. They played a couple of warm-up games. The last one was against India A, and I suppose something of note from there was that unlike during the warm-up games against England, the BCCI actually selected a couple of spinners and they did some damage against Australia. Saxena and Dhruv took 9 wickets between them in Australia's first innings. So it will be interesting to see if there's anyone in the Australian side who can plonk down his anchor like Captain Cook did for England and really counter Ashwin and Ojha. But anyway, Nishant, what do you see as being the key points in this test series?
In cricket, the strength of a side can only really be measured by their resistance to pressure, and the key for Australia in this series will be to put India under consistent pressure. And as we've seen quite often in the last few months, India do tend to crumble quicker than feta cheese over Greek salad when they do come under the cosh. Australia will have to look to keep India on the back foot for as long as possible throughout this series. Of course, only figuratively, not literally. You've got to keep it full in the subcontinent. And Australia can do this through 2 men in particular. Firstly, David Warner, who's got a really unfair rap throughout his career as a batsman. He's been dismissed variously as a slogger and a basher who would never really make it in Tests. Yet for my money, I think David Warner's done outstandingly well. He's formed a very solid, contrasting partnership with Ed Cowan at the top of the order for Australia, and having seen a lot of Warner in the IPL, I reckon he's actually a lot smarter than people give him credit for. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to see Dave Warner on University Challenge anytime soon, but I reckon that with a bat in hand, he's a pretty safe pair of hands. And speaking of players who've perhaps been unfairly tarnished by the Slogger title, there's also Glenn Maxwell, who of course went for $1 million to Mumbai Indians in the IPL auction recently. And as much as anything else, it does seem that Maxwell has been quite maligned by a fair few misleading posts and comments in the media, essentially painting him as a brash, arrogant young man and totally dismissing his cricketing ability along the way. And while I can see Maxwell rubbing a few people up the wrong way, at the end of the day, you've got to remember, he is an Aussie, it's in his blood, the poor lad can't help it. And now, if we speak a bit about Glenn Maxwell's cricketing talents, he has actually got a first-class average of 43 with the bat and 33 with the ball, so he does firmly go into the all-rounder category, although, to be fair, his bowling does leave a lot to be desired. However, I have seen a fair bit of Maxwell developing over the last couple of years, and in particular, the thing to watch out is how his line has developed. He has started bowling a lot more outside off stump, really giving it an opportunity to spin and come into the batsman. And I think it is a bit of a toss-up between Glenn Maxwell and Moses Enrique for the first test, so it'll be interesting to see who Australia go for, but I do see Glenn Maxwell as a long-term X-factor, and I'm not saying that he's going to take fifers every game, but I do think that he kind of has an uncanny knack of maybe being able to clean up a tail or two here and there, and maybe put India on the back foot in a session with the bat as well, with David Warner in pretty aggressive form as well. I do think that Australia could have their way in this test series.
Okay, well, they're certainly in with more than a chance. I think it is quite key that Cowan will be opening rather than Watson. I certainly think that will give them more of a stable platform, and so Watson will come in at number 4. But on the Indian side of things, I'm unclear at the moment who will get the nod to open with Sehwag, but personally I'd quite like to see Dhawan come in. I think he's quite an impish sort of player, but also when he hits in the V he can look rather classical. And just mentioning Sehwag there, the other interesting thing is that he said he's actually going to bat wearing glasses rather than taking the contact lens route, which is what Sourav Ganguly did. But this is just following in the long and proud tradition of Indian players such as Dilip Doshi and Anil Kumble, who both wore spectacles to play in. Anil Kumble looking quite the lady killer, I must say, in his. But Nishan, we've spoken before about how Rahul Dravid got bowled a lot towards the end of his career in those England and Australia away series, and whether that was connected with failing vision or failing reflexes perhaps. So it will be interesting to see how Sehwag with his famed hand-eye coordination goes. So Nishan, do you think this could make a difference for him?
Well, James, for Sehwag's sake, I do hope it makes a difference, because in the last couple of years of Test cricket, he has been very indifferent indeed. Sehwag just averaged 29.5 in 2011 and 31.5 in 2012 in Tests, so he is kind of teetering on the edge. Of course, Gambhir was the first of India's opening partnership to be shoved off the cliff, and you do wonder how Sehwag's spectacles might actually affect him as a spectacle overall. I mean, what sort of glasses will he go for? Will he go for the Woody Allen, really thick frame, sort of Buddy Holly-esque?
Nice.
Will he really just try to put off the bowlers like that? Or will he go for the sort of rounder framed Harry Potter style glasses?
Could do.
At his current rate, Sehwag might as well be batting in Stevie Wonder's sunglasses.
Dear me.
And of course, in addition to Sehwag, there are quite a few other Indian cricketers who are kind of battling for their places at the moment and battling for their immediate futures as well. Of course, Ravi Ashwin really struggled in the England Test series. He took just 14 wickets at 52 apiece, whereas Pragyan Ojha took 20 wickets at 29 in that series. So he really is coming under pressure from Harbhajan Singh, of all people, for that off-spinner's role. And of course, we go back to Sachin Tendulkar. The will he, won't he retire from Test cricket debate is kind of internal right now. He hasn't scored a Test 100 since Cape Town in 2011. Of course, he still has got as much time as he wants in Test cricket. The Indian selectors will never push him, let alone give him a gentle nudge as they did to Gambhir. So he has got time on his side somehow, but the pressure from the public will be building with every Tendulkar failure.
And now to the news that South Africa have defeated Pakistan in the second test at Newlands, and with it taken the series, their 6th in succession. It was another very impressive performance from Graham Smith's men, but Pakistan really did have quite a few chances to win this match. But at the moment, South Africa, they're really a sort of Cobra Python hybrid. They just sort of squeeze, and then they suddenly strike when their opponents are weak.
It does sound rather like you on a night out, James.
Well, yes, very, very similar, I must admit. But yeah, we saw it in Adelaide with the great Faf and AB de Villiers' rearguard, and then they struck in Perth in the final test to win the series out there. And again, it happened here. Pakistan had a lot of opportunities throughout the match. They batted very well. In the first innings, both Asad Shafiq and Yunus Khan notched 111, which was the first time that two players have scored Nelson in the same innings in an international match. And of course, in the second innings, it wasn't enough, but Azhar Ali eventually got the benefit of the radio cricket bump with his dogged 65. But then again, of course, Philander came in and spat venom all over his and Pakistan's fireworks. There's been a lot of talk about the selections Pakistan made for the side. Personally, I was very surprised that Abdur Rahman did not play, and the game turned out to be a bit of a mirror image of the Abu Dhabi test against England in 2012. South Africa chasing a small total. So, Nishan, Pakistan really could have won this test, I feel. So why didn't they?
Well, I think it all boils down to Pakistan's selections for this tour, which have been very, very strange indeed. I think their bowling has been pretty much led single-handedly by Saeed Ajmal, who took 10 wickets in this last test match at Cape Town, which is a phenomenal effort considering the lack of support that he received. And to be honest, I'm surprised that Mohammad Hafiz didn't bowl more to support him. He only bowled 11 overs in the test match compared to Saeed Ajmal's 60, and I do think that bowling them in tandem, there does seem to be almost a sort of stigma with bowling two off-spinners in tandem, even though they are pretty similar in terms of not being huge spinners and possessing that arm ball and the doosra as well. I do think that Mohammad Hafiz is definitely a more potent option than the likes of Tanveer Ahmed, Umar Gul and Mohammad Irfan as well. Mohammad Irfan made his test debut at Cape Town. Of course, he is the world's tallest first-class and international cricketer. So Mohammad Irfan took 3 wickets on debut, which is a pretty decent effort. He was pretty hard done by a couple of dodgy decisions, as were a couple of other bowlers and batsmen in what was a terrible test match for umpiring and the whole DRS system. I'm pleasantly surprised that Mohammad Irfan managed to last the entire test. He bowled 21 overs in South Africa's first innings, and for a man as tall as him, it would seem that he would be more prone to injuries than usual. But it's the support that Pakistan haven't really received in the bowling. As I mentioned before, Umar Gul being really disappointing in this series so far. Tanveer Ahmed looks completely innocuous, and the other option they have is Rahat Ali, who was pretty terrible in the first test match. The selection, or non-selection rather, that I can't fathom right now is that of Wahab the Jacket Riaz. Now, I can't really understand why this man isn't in Pakistan's first team. I can't understand why Pakistan didn't even fly him out to South Africa after the first test match, during which he actually took 9 wickets in innings in the Pakistan domestic league. So it does seem that Wahab Riaz is out of favour in Pakistan's cricket circles right now, but going by sheer quality, he does walk into the first team of Pakistan right now, especially with Junaid Khan out injured. If you have a first team of Saeed Ajmal, Wahab Riaz, Abdur Rahman as you mentioned, James, and perhaps Mohammad Irfan or Umar Gul, depending on what flavour you like, Pakistan have done themselves a great disservice and potentially even lost themselves the match before it started.
And now to Australia, where there was a very edifying incident when New South Wales fielder Nick Maddinson decided to have a little nibble on what appeared to be a cheese toastie during a Ryobi Cup game against South Australia. Well, there was quite a lot of attention drawn to this incident, but I just think this is following in a very proud tradition of food on pitches during cricket matches, because of course we had Marcus Trescothick sucking Murray mints during the 2005 Ashes in order to keep the shine on the ball. We had An unnamed England player, but allegedly Matt Pryor or possibly even Alistair Cook, putting jelly beans on a length when Zahir Khan was batting during a test at Trent Bridge in 2007. And then, of course, in a more practical sense, we've got wicket keepers who've long put slabs of steak in their gloves to lessen the impact of the ball. This was a tradition started by the South African Ernest Austin Halliwell back at the turn of the century, and it was also carried on by famous England keeper Alan Knott, although, of course, him being English, we can't guarantee it wasn't actually bits of Grand National winners he was using to protect his digits. But just as an aside, Nish, I mean, what the hell must that smell like to your teammates when you get back into the changing room after a day in the sun and you take off your wiki gloves to expose what is basically meat which has been casseroled in your own palm sweat for 6 hours. It's quite horrific, and I mean, I don't know if maybe this is still done by wicket keepers these days, and I just wondered how Peter Siddle would feel if Matthew Wade took a catch of him with the aid of meat. Maybe he'll prepare some lovely tofu for Matthew Wade to put inside his gloves during this India series.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Radio Cricket. Thank you very much for joining us once again this week. Of course, you can catch us on our new YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/altcricket. Thanks for joining us again. I've been Nishant Joshi.
And I've been James Marsh. And I leave you with the words of Manoj Tiwari. Everybody is gifted, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then you are wrong. Goodbye!
I think it was a very poor performance, one of the worst things I have ever seen done on a cricket field. Good night.